Hi everyone. Even this photo is taken in just one crossroad. There's only one crossroad of the neighborhood. That's it. At the back, you can see the church, the Emmanuel Church. We are going to visit it. I have a video. I was inside. We're going to visit it next week. To the right-hand side from me. Well, to my left, but to your right, this white building with blue windows and doors. This is the Beit Emmanuel. This is a pilgrim's house, and we're going to see it also next time. But for now, we're going to have a little walk in the American colony in the neighborhood, and we're going to visit this wooden building to my right, to your left. And sorry. And thank you so much for your coffee, dear. So let's get started. I just want to make sure there wouldn't be any any extra noise. So, just as a reminder, in the middle of the 19th century, after the Crimean War, the Ottomans opened the Holy Land for Christian pilgrimage, for the allowed purchase of land for Christians, for Jews. They really couldn't care less. They wanted to get themselves together. They wanted to at least uh, regain at least some power and some resources, renew at least some resources after the devastating Crimean War. And this was the start of actually what eventually would grow into the mass tourism industry. It started as just, the pilgrimage of Christians, and we in early stages there was basically nothing there for them, and there were no facilities, there were no and there was not enough space. But little by little, there was no transportation. But little by little, things started to come up. Businesses started to come up. Facilities started to be built, and this is how the tourism industry was started, basically thanks to the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. This is the photograph of a small boat approaching the shore of Jaffa, which is now part of Tel Aviv. Actually, it's an ancient city, known at least or as early as from the Canaanite times. So we're talking several thousands of years ago, actually. And the pilgrims, mm, obviously, every pilgrim and also Christian pilgrim, Jewish pilgrim, and even a Muslim pilgrim, which there were also, of course, there was also great influx and the surge in Muslim pilgrimage, because the Ottomans were pretty much closed for everyone. Well, this part of the region under control of the Ottomans was not really developed, was not really um, it was never really a focus for the Ottomans. They just conquered this land 400 years before that. We're talking here 1516, 1517, and they just collected taxes and had their strongmen just making sure things were under control, and that was basically it. We don't know much. It's probably the least studied part of history, episode of history of the Holy Land. We know so much that happened 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, but we know so little about this, let's say, um, 3.5 centuries, before the Crimean War. We know very, very little. Okay, we know of the Napoleon's arrival to Jaffa, and this is when he totally nailed it and conquered Jaffa within less than 3 days by drowning Jaffa in blood of the Ottomans. But I would say that was probably the biggest event that had happened in those lands. But everyone wanted to see Jerusalem, but there was no way to access Jerusalem other than by sea. So, and Jaffa was a port city, and this is where every pilgrim would arrive. So to Jaffa. And but the story of the German colonies, it's a little bit different story. The American colonies, the German colonies, it's Um, a little bit different because actually the very first colonies, not the pilgrimage sites, not the pilgrimage hotels, not the guest houses, not schools, but just little settlements started to emerge a little bit before that. But the massive thing on a massive scale, right, that started after the Crimean War, and that's the 1860s. Um, the basically the main reason for these type of moves where Europeans or Germans, right, and also Americans were ready to leave everything behind and head to the other end of the world and rebuild their life completely. That was basically a religious ground. In the 19th century, a lot of Christian groups, regardless of their denominations, but mainly we're talking about Protestants and Lutherans, they underwent with a lot of, I would say, a crisis. Well, they were some cataclysms, and for example, the volcanic eruption in Indonesia that actually affected Europe. There was very poor harvest. There was a summer without sun. And this was seen by some religious groups as, some would claim that they were sects. Well, okay, let it be sects, whatever. Well, that was seen as an omen. That was seen as a sign of the end of days, and the end of days is associated in Christianity with the arrival of Messiah, that is Jesus. So to make sure that the true believers would be there when Jesus would show up, it was important to go to the Holy Land. And one of the prerequisites for the return of Messiah would be the return of the Jewish people to the Holy Land. And those Christian groups, they would head to the Holy Land not to proselytize Christianity to Jews or Arabs, but they wanted to help to prepare the Holy Land for arrivals of Jews, to make sure they would do everything on time before the year 2000. Well, they would reschedule the end of day several times, but eventually most people thought that it would take place in the year 2000. And we probably realized that that actually didn't happen. That's how Tel Aviv looks nowadays. And that's the whole different story, right? It's a much bigger city, and Jaffa is a teeny tiny part of it. But Jaffa started as a small city within its walls, and then it started growing. And now it's the Tel Aviv is a big international city there. But it started as a tiny fortress, then with a lot of communities moving, international communities, and then growing and growing and growing, and then becoming the kind of the unofficial capital of Israel, obviously Jerusalem, right? And everyone coming to the Holy Land would come to the shores of Jaffa. And just by Charles Clore Park, which is very close to Jaffa, it's already modern part of kind of a more modern part of Tel Aviv, but it's still the same promenade. There is a stone. This is a memorial, which is it's very easy to pass by. And actually, this is my video from maybe 2020, 2023. But when I was there last summer, I couldn't find the stone. I think they moved it for some reason. Maybe it's back to its original site because there's so much construction going on in Tel Aviv. So I never know. I never know. Every time I'm there, it looks different. But I couldn't find the stone last time. Not last time I was there because it was January, but last summer. But anyway, so it actually says here that 157 American Christian lovers of Zion, who arrived by sail on the Neely Chapman on September 22, 1866, bringing wooden houses from Jonesport, Maine, to establish the American colony in Jaffa. So they came in 1866. But they were not the first ones. There had already been several German colonies that came in 1850s. There had already been the American colony in Jerusalem, but it wasn't really called the American colony. It was, it would be at least about a decade more for them to actually establish the colony, right? But they were the first Americans to come to Jaffa. There was about 40 of them were actually children. So those were just several families, lovers of Zion, right, from town of Jonesport, in the state of Maine. They came to the shores of Jaffa, just having this belief that they would bring their lifestyle, their knowledge of agriculture, their knowledge of life and household, and they would do everything they could, everything in their own hands to improve this land, to help Jews return. So lovers of Zion. Again, they didn't come to proselytize. They were not the group of Protestants that would come to Jerusalem in 1850s. That's the whole different story. So this is just a photo. So some of the videos I filmed in the museum, just little bits that I'm also incorporated in this video, and I've also I've taken permission from the museum to film it, so it's I will share the story when the time comes. So what I'm sharing here is the photographs of Jonesport, a small town that was mainly involved in um, well, they mainly was woodworks. Also, obviously, it would be the sea products. It was a fisherman's town, so it's fishermen and just woods, fishermen and wood cutting, wood transportation, and shipbuilding. Obviously, because they were so good with all sorts of woodworks, and so shipbuilding, houses. All sorts of transportation, or well, the logistics of the transportation of wood to other states. That's what this region and what Jonesport was about. So they had the ship, Nelly Chapman, three-mast ship, and they took their homes. All these families, they took their homes with them. They took their household items. Some of them took even their carriages with them and also their families, and they set off on this journey that lasted for more than 40 days. I think it was 42 days. And they just had this idea in mind to reach the Holy Land and to start things from scratch with all their, well, profound knowledge of agriculture. They were sure they would be able to improve the land. They were sure they would be able to rebuild their lives there because they had their houses. They had their houses. They shipped. They prepared everything and loaded it on the ship. And they knew they would be able to assemble the houses and basically put their lives together again. They were headed. Well, they were. It was headed by Reverend George Adams, who was an incredibly charismatic man who knew the Old Testament and the New Testament by heart. At least that's what's mentioned in a lot of books that I've read. And he was a very passionate speaker, and people followed him. And they were sure that they would be welcomed in this land, and they were sure they would make a difference. That's how it started. It didn't really go as planned. And the colony is called now American German colony, right? So clearly at some point Germans also joined. But let's walk a little bit in this area. So this is the video I filmed last summer. And as you enter this colony, the first thing you see a wooden house. you see a wooden building, and this is exactly one of those houses that Americans took with them. So when we see the museum, we will learn more about how they were able to ship everything to the Holy Land. But what we're looking at is a little bit modernized, but still the original wooden house that belonged to the people of Jonesport. Later on, obviously, the buildings would be changed when Germans came, right? And we will be talking more about the German story in the second episode, and I think we're going to need just another more episode. But in general, so this is the photograph of the house. We will be able to talk more when the time comes. And well, it looked pretty much almost the same way, right? You can see that. There you go. A wooden building, and this building is still mostly wooden, but it was a little bit rebuilt by the Germans. And then next to it, you'll see a very different design, a much bigger building, which is a five-star hotel. And this five-star hotel, we are also going to visit it. I was allowed to do a little bit of filming because there are some interesting stories to share as well. But what we see now in the American German colony, it's on the one hand, so it started as an epic story of the epic journey of Americans, but unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. And in the museum, we're going to talk about it in more details. But for now, I'm just going to share with you the story that 2 years later, those Americans that survived, they would eventually decide to go back to Jonesport. So they realized they would not be able to survive. The thing is that once they arrived to the shores of Jaffa, they were not really welcomed by the Ottomans, and they were not even allowed to leave the shore. For some time, they were kept on the boat. I mean, on the ship, and then they were finally allowed to come ashore. But then they had to stay for several weeks, for about 2 weeks, in the small in tents, because the Ottomans wouldn't let them anywhere because they still had to sign the land deal. And that was really a bumpy start. And then the following 2 years would be the stories of losses and deaths and disappointment. So eventually, those Americans that survived, they would prefer to leave. And this is when Germans, starting from 1868, 1869, this is when the German story would begin. And this is when the church would be constructed. So this would be for part 2 and part 3. Now we are still exploring kind of the American story and also enjoying a little bit of the vibe of this neighborhood, which looks and feels a little bit of Europe. It doesn't feel like America to me. Well, but it does feel a little bit, I don't know, maybe it does remind me of a little bit with the palm trees, maybe a bit of Florida, maybe. I haven't been to Florida, so I don't know, but yeah, you wouldn't find a lot of flags of Israel, I believe, in Florida. But well, palm trees and this type of terraces and balconies, it just feels like very much, city by the ocean or, well, a city by the sea. Okay, that's fine. It works for me. But it does have this European vibe. And all these German colonies that we also have German colony in Haifa. We have, there is also another German colony in Tel Aviv called Sharon, Sarona, and several others that also, they don't really function as German colonies anymore, obviously, but there are no really German colonies anymore and it's only the name and kind of let's say a landmark. Well, but these are the distinct ones that we have spoken about. However, there's one particular house that I would like to take you to. and this is it. So this house looks interesting. One part of it looks wooden, and the other one is built from stone. This was done for a reason. It's a friendship house. You see the flag of, you see the American flag there. It's probably hanging the wrong way, and I know you don't like it. Indeed, it's okay. It's okay. And this originally the wooden part, uh, it looks different. It looks like two buildings put together. And that's exactly what it is. Two buildings put together because first it was the American homes, the wooden home from Jonesport. And then when Germans came, they started stone construction and they rebuilt this house. And it was rebuilt in stone. But then a century later, this history changed again. And now this is a friendship house, which part of it looks like an American home, typical um, uh, for Jonesport, and the other one is a stone house, typical, for kind of Germany. Well, I mean that how it was typical back in the 19th century. And it's a museum. This is the Museum of the American German Colony. The museum was established by a couple, Gene Holmes and Dr. Reed Holmes. So Gene Holmes was the certified construction supervisor from the States, and Dr. Reed Holmes, well, late Dr. Reed Holmes, was the historian uh, and the writer. Okay, let's put it like this: historian and the writer. So they both in the background, well, actually, they came from Maine, and I will share the story also with you. And I told you at the beginning of the tour, I told you that I have been given permission to film in the museum. So I was lucky to actually, I called the museum once, and uh, well, Ms. Holmes picked up the phone and I recognized her voice because I watched an interview. Well, I read a lot about the American German colony, and I told her who I was and what I wanted to do, and she told me, yeah, of course, go ahead and do it. So that's just, I was so happy to have been given permission to film and then to visit the museum because the museum was only open in summer. For winter time, Miss Holmes and back in the days when Dr. Reed Holmes was around, they would normally go back to the States for winter time and would come back here only for 5 or 6 months during the summertime. That's that's at least how it used to be. So the one of the books that well I was I'm well, this story is based around the museum exhibition and also the history of the American colony that was written by Dr. Reed, The Forerunners. It's really the best resource of like ever about the history of the American colony. Obviously, American German colony is a different story. So with the German side of things, we're going to talk about in the upcoming tours. But now we are focusing on the American story. And yes, those Americans were, well, they were the forerunners. They had no idea what to expect. And when they came, they very quickly realized none of them had been prepared for that. That's for sure. And in the museum, we will see what they brought with them. We will see what they used here and what kind of tools they used, what kind of household items they had with them. We'll also talk a little bit about the people behind well that American German about American colony. I'm talking American because and also, I might have shared it with you several years ago. I just accidentally met Miss Holmes by the Friendship House, as I was studying for my tours. It was, I think, 2023. Maybe it was the end of 2022. I'm not sure, but well, back in I couldn't really tell much about myself because I wasn't a guide at that point. I was just Noah, so I didn't tell her what I was preparing for. But last summer, I told her I was a licensed tour guide, and I wanted to do this and that, and she was ecstatic about this opportunity. Anyway, so this is the photo I took last summer, and at the corner of the building, you can see an interesting artwork. That's the carriage, horse-driven carriage. We will be talking about it on this tour, and that might be talking about it on this tour, and also on the upcoming tour next weekend. We will see. And this is the video I filmed about a year ago or something like that, because you'll see that there is no this artwork there at the moment. Well, in this particular video, but the house is here. So the friendship house is called so because the idea, or well, of Mr. and Mrs. Holmes was to well, not just to highlight the American story, but to preserve both the American and the German story. And that's why the building looks this way. And the thing is that had it been, well, it's only thanks to the Holmes that we have this American German colony, which now is one of the most lucrative and expensive areas for real estate. It's extremely expensive to live there. Well, Tel Aviv is one of the most expensive cities in the world. Well, and yeah, and especially that neighborhood, because well, back in the 70s and 80s of the previous century, I'm talking about 20th century, this area looked like that. It was, the buildings were falling apart. This is the Friendship House. That's what it looked like. It was, well, there were some homeless people living there. There was no floors, no roofs, no windows, nothing. And it was just slums. It's incredible. Well, that was kind of, that was not a priority back then. And things changed when Miss Holmes and well, Mr. and Mrs. Holmes visited Israel in the 80s. They came with a Christian group. They wanted to see, well, because they knew of the size of the American German colony, and when they saw the place, well, they couldn't believe their eyes. And it was then Mrs. Holmes decided to, well, she came up with a plan. She just realized she couldn't let that happen. She didn't want the place to be completely destroyed with time. And they came up with a plan, a very detailed plan, to restore the buildings and to make sure that this area would be listed. But well, and that's exactly what happened. Also, as the book has it, in the fortunate turn of events, the Reeds, the Holmes family, they were able to buy this Friendship House, so they own that house. But what they bought was basically a dilapidating semi wooden, semi stone structure with no floors, with almost non-existent roof, and gaping holes instead of windows. That was just it. And then they had to hire specialists. They had to hire some American specialists, well, from Jonesport, that knew how to work with wood, and they had to hire restorers that would consult and they could consult with about the 19th century techniques of carpentry and building from wood and everything. So this was the project that took about 2 decades altogether in the working. And by early 2000s, the American-German colony already looked very different. So now it's a place, an amazing place to be in. It's cozy, it's vibrant, it's super expensive. It's I don't even know. Well, just not to get disappointed, I don't even check the prices, the real estate prices. I just know it is expensive and I cannot afford it. So that's it. To the friendship house. It works really weird hours, not every day, but that's okay. I so I came there on time. I was allowed to film, and I'm happy to share it with you. By the way, this is important. So just let's remember this wooden support. It's original, and so this house was originally built by by the Americans, right? So in the the homes, well, it was not 100% scientific, well, restoration because there was not so much to restore. But these wooden blocks, these support beams are original. This they were able to support. This they were able to preserve, and it's still so it's kind of the pillars, right? So it's kind of the foundation of the of this modern building, and it's still standing on the original wooden beams. In the on kind of in this basement, they have a little art center. It's one of the local artists that has this exhibition here, and well, it's just there are sometimes some exhibitions are held and some events. But now we're going upstairs. These are the original steps, by the way, the local stone well, you can find everywhere in along the coastal plain. Well, it's just some artworks, but well, remember the chariot, the carriage, and the horseman sculpture that we saw at the corner of the building. So it was created by this artist, and it's a big project which we will be talking about in the next episode. Now we are upstairs and we are in the first room. In this room, well, as I said, it's only partially restoration. The rest was obviously making sure, well, because Holmes bought this house, they also wanted to be able to live there comfortably. And they wanted things to be convenient and modern. So I think they kind of found this happy middle between preservation of what could have been preserved, but also improving and creating, building anew of something that would just make their life comfortable here in this house. And it doesn't, and it looks really great, very authentic, and this place smells history. In the first room, they give us a little bit of story of Jonesport and what the city was about. So again, it's like the wood cutting industry, it's shipbuilding, it's obviously, well, carpentry of all sorts, and also, well, sea products, fishing, well, sardines, the mackerel, all sorts of canned sea products. Well, they were produced in Maine and in Jonesport too, and this is what they supplied to well across the states, as far as I believe. Well, that's what I've been told in the museum. I don't know much about it. Well, maple syrup apparently also came from Jonesport. Not only Jonesport, but you have the idea. I don't know what fisherman friend is doing there, but I believe well, a lot of fishermen uh, probably would be happy to have a little bit of those lozenge because I assume it was very difficult to fish and just to work in the conditions that they had to work in. This is the flag of Maine. The symbol is moose. So you see a fisherman on the one side with the anchor and I think it's a carpenter or maybe it's a I don't know if that's a carpenter or maybe it's a farmer and maybe a carpenter too on the other side. And it says dirigo, which means I direct, something like that. And obviously you see the woods. So yeah, that's well the wood and fishing. That was the main industries that the people of Jonesport have always been historically involved. And so they built ships, and also they supplied ships in the well across the states, and they supplied wood and wooden buildings also across the states. That's what those were very hardworking people and obviously very religious people. Another thing that the state of Maine is maybe it's still popular with. Well, let me know because I'm not familiar with the story. It's the blueberries, and this is the tool that they would actually collect the wild blueberries. It's the original 19th century. I don't even know. It's like a scoop or what? Just to collect the blueberries, you need to lean and you need to go through the blueberry groves, and this is how you would be collecting the berries. Well, so blueberries was also a big. It's also one of the symbols. At least it used to be the symbols of Maine, and Jonesport was one of the centers of the blueberry something. I don't know. And yeah, this is also a little homage to the Native Americans that lived in Maine. It's kind of it's a memory. Obviously, these items were not brought with were not brought by those 150 something people, right? Obviously not. That's just something that the Holmes family decided to place. And also, you can see here Mark Twain standing by the house he was staying when he visited the Holy Land, and also the book um, of Mark Twain you can see there, and also you see a cutout from the newspaper about the last U.S. sardine factory closes down in Maine. So I assume it's probably not longer the case. So, but what is Mark Twain's book doing here? Well, Mark Twain was also among those, pilgrims, the travelers that went to see, well, the region at that time was called Palestine, but it has nothing to do with the current state of affairs because this was just the name of the region, right? I have told this so many times, but I will say it again and again because this is the fact. It was the name of the region, the name coming from the second century given by the Romans. So Syria, Palestina, it was the name of the region. And Ottomans, when they conquered this land, they just kept referring to it as Ottoman Palestine. And all people who lived in those lands would be Palestinian Jews, Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Arabs, and that's just how it was. So everyone wanted to see Palestine. That's why you see all those historical postcards with "Visit Palestine." That's because it was the name of the region, not not the Palestinian state the way we understand it nowadays, right? That's a whole different story. And Mark Twain also wanted to see Palestine, and he traveled. It was like a big Euro trip, and also the trip to the Middle East. It was a long journey, and Mark Twain totally hated it. It's called, he called his book of his accounts of events, of his experiences that he wrote about. It's called Innocents Abroad because people largely were not prepared for this trip at all. That's, by the way, Mark Twain over there in this photo. You see his face in a circle. It's the best photo I was able to find. There are not so many of them. So he was not part of that American colony. No. But he was among those thousands of people that went to see the Holy Land, be it a pilgrimage or just just a trip out of curiosity. That didn't really matter much. So just a little quote from his book. It was released in 1881. So, but his trip was in 1870s. So a desolate country whose soil is rich enough but is given over wholly to weeds, a silent mortal expand. A desolation is here that not even imagination can grace with the pomp of life and action. We never saw a human being on the whole route. There was hardly a tree or shrub anywhere. Even the olive and the cactus, those fast friends of the worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. And well, that's kind of it gives you the setting for well that and the scenery that also those poor people of Jonesport saw when they came, and they came from a region, well, woods, fertile soil, blueberries growing, um, rich farmlands, and that was it. Sand dunes, desolation, and not a single shrub. Well, maybe a little bit of some shrubs and some cactus trees, but that was it. So if Mark Twain just hated it, he was on this very, very brief journey. Imagine how tough it was for 2 years for the people to survive. That was absolutely horrible. And remember, I told you that these Americans, when they came ashore finally, after having spent several days on the ship, which couldn't really dock very close to the shore because the Mediterranean Sea is really shallow uh, uh, by the seashore. So they actually had to get on smaller boats to be able to disembark. And the Ottomans, they just told them they couldn't go any further, so they had to stay in the camp for several weeks until everything, all the land deal would be sorted out with the Ottomans. And the horrible thing is, very unfortunate, again, in the very unfortunate turn of events, they could they couldn't really find the worst spot for the camp. The thing is that a year before that, Ottomans buried there several dozens of people that died from a typhus. I think it was well, it was definitely a really, really catchy disease. And this is how several people, mainly children, started to die. And this is when the only doctor that was with them also died. A very unfortunate turn of events. This is the original photograph. This is the photograph. You can find it online. I also saw it in the museum. So that was their camp. They had no idea where they were set in their camp. That was horrible. That was absolutely horrible. Well, eventually everything was sorted out, and they were able to go to the designated area. And again, so they brought with them their agricultural tools. So people of Jonesport were very good with agriculture, wood cutting, well, fishing, shipbuilding, everything, carpentry in general. They were very good at all these things. And well, they were sure they would be able to thrive, they would thrive on these lands too. But the thing is, they were not prepared for the landscape, for the climate, for the sand, because it was just sand dunes. And so this is the photograph of the machines, right? That they brought with them, the tools that they brought with them. There wasn't really much they could do with those tools, not much. So, but okay, they're they were still at the very, let's say, early stage. They first needed to build their homes. They first needed to at least somehow cover themselves from the elements, from the sun. And there was really nothing there. nothing there. And they started building their homes because they had their homes with them. Well, they just, everything was prepared, packed, and loaded on the ships. So they just, but imagine they just had to transport everything from the seashore along the sand dunes, through the sand dunes. Imagine carrying heavy stuff through the sand dunes. They had to transport everything and start building it. Wow. Okay. So that's luckily at that point it wasn't really that hot because they arrived in springtime, but it was raining also heavily, really, really profusely. Uh, this is when they started realizing that, well, that their Reverend George Adams had little issues, well, had some issues with alcohol, and there were a lot of contradictions with him, and they just kind of started to kind of see the real face of Mr. Adams, and that wasn't a good sign. But they were already there, so they had to give it a try. By the way, in Maine, I found this photograph online again. Some photos of a really low resolution, but most of them are really good ones. So there was also a memorial stone, kind of a little monument commemorating the story of those families that departed on that journey to the desolate Holy Land on the ship, on the Nelly Chapin ship. Well, this is the photograph, the aerial footage taken in early 1900s. So what you see, well, you see the church building, right? So that's definitely already the the times when the German colony was there. So it doesn't really have much to do with how things looked during the these 2 years that the American settlers were there. But what you need to see is the size of the colony. Well, it's bigger than it is now because many buildings eventually dilapidated and are not longer there. But what you can see is also there's a lot of trees there, right? So I told you that it was actually the sand dunes, but that's when they arrived. And when the Germans came, uh, they eventually succeeded in growing oranges. Also, oranges were planted by the Ottomans, but mainly it was the Germans that were involved in agriculture and in oranges. And orange, right? The Jaffa orange. This is a big brands. I'm sure you all know of the Jaffa oranges. So yes, this is where the orange grows for, very close to Jaffa, in all those areas around Jaffa. So yes, technically speaking, so this was a fertile land, but not for blueberries, not in the way that Americans would be doing that. So very different, very different. So what you see in this photograph, you can see the Beit Emmanuel, so that house with the white walls and blue windows. Also the Driscoll Hotel that I showed you in the beginning. And to the right-hand side, you can see a small cottage, wooden cottage. That's one of the homes of the Americans, one of the examples of the rare examples of American homes which is not in the original condition, right? It was rebuilt by Germans, and it's now partially preserved its wooden structure. So, but we will talk about it also in the upcoming episodes. Oh, why do we see a train here? Well, and what else do we see here? Well, we see some wooden tools. Some tools, they are some tools are new, but they just recreate the tools that were used back in the 19th century. We have a lot of, the original lamps of just the same period. And we also have this um, uh, obviously, when let's put it like this: when they came and when they started rebuilding, building their homes, they also wanted to fill their interiors with furniture, with some household items that they were used to, and they took everything with them. So that was quite incredible. I Well, when we had to leave, we only had like 6 suitcases with us, but they were able to load their ship with actual homes. I mean, with the wood, for home. That was incredible. And in this very corner, that's the original shutters and all sorts of wooden constructions that the Holmes family were able to save. Original. Well, in the photos, you could see um, some shutters, you could see some wooden elements, and this is now part of the museum exhibition. So some tools, well, the tools are mostly the recreation, because normally this type of tools wouldn't be preserved because they were just tools. Why would they need to be saved? Uh, Well, the camera, by the way, it's the original camera that they were able to find. They were some of the first photographers of the pilgrims of the Christian communities would be Germans. So in Jerusalem, in the American colony, there was open a photography workshop. In Haifa, there was also the photo atelier. The Photoshop was also there. So actually, those were the Americans and the Europeans that took the first photographs of this new pilgrimage boom for us. So the last thing I will be talking about, and we are going to continue next time. Uh, so the what uh, what is this train doing here? It wasn't the toy that one of these poor kids, 40 something kids, took with them. No, it's just a toy that the Holmes family brought with them from Maine. Uh, all the wood that was prepared for the construction of the houses, it was packed quite compactly and loaded on the train, on the steam train. And then on the steam train, the train would take this wood to the port, and from there it would be loaded on Nelly Chapin ship, and it would off they go, and off they went. To the right hand side from the lamp, you will see a postcard with the Lyon steam train. So this is that exactly the steam train that brought the wood to the port. And this is where we are going to put this on hold to continue next time. We will see the rest of the museum. We will talk about how they carried on with their lives, with already several children um, uh, passed away, doctor passed away, the Reverend Adams losing his mind and losing the touch with the sense of touch with reality. We will talk about that. We will talk about some tough decisions that were made. We will also talk about one fantastic story of success. So it was not a total failure, which is amazing. No, there actually was a story of American dream come true in the little American colony in the middle of nowhere in the Middle East. But that's next time. Let me open the chat. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to share with you, and hi those who joined us a little after we started. I usually don't get notified on that, so I can't say hi as the tour goes, but now I can say hi, which is amazing, and it's great to have you all here with us. And I'm sharing the link. So on May 10th, same time as tonight, I am taking you on part 2, and hopefully it will take us all together 3, well, I don't know. Yeah, it should be three episodes altogether. Hold on a second. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, this is where you can find the link. So that tour is already up. Unlike, well, many other tours are still just waiting to be scheduled, but I promise I will work on it. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining me. Let me know if you have any questions. And after that, thank you, Cindy. After that, we are going to visit well, we're going to talk about the history of the German community. So I was able to visit this big pilgrimage house called Beit Emmanuel, the House of Emmanuel. And then we will also see the Emmanuel Church. But the church was constructed during the German time. And so that's why I'm not talking about everything that we can see nowadays. So that's why I'm kind of keeping it putting it off to the time when it's time to talk about it. Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Dorley. Did they bring animals with them as well? No, they didn't bring animals with them. No, no, no. The animal, no. Oh, they didn't. It wasn't the Noah's Ark, but they brought wood. Yeah, they would use the same animals. So they would normally be donkeys, camels. They bought it from the Ottomans. Um, well, they had cows eventually. That was also there. Yeah, but they mostly were involved with well agriculture. But again, not the Dolores. Thank you so much for the tips. But they only stayed there for 2 years. So I'm sure they would have brought a lot more. They would have contributed to the land a lot more, but they just were not really prepared for it. That's the thing. But when Germans came, oh, it was a fully fledged dairy farm with cows. We well, with well, it was a proper farm there, and especially in Sarana. In Sarana, it was even bigger. Yeah, which is in Tel Aviv proper. That's a different story. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you next week. Oh, actually, I will see you tomorrow, hopefully, if the weather conditions are okay for me and my friend Oscar to go there without getting soaking wet. We are definitely taking you to the botanical garden to see what's in bloom, to enjoy the views to enjoy the views of Tbilisi also from the cable car. So I'm hoping that it works tomorrow. If not tomorrow, I'm sure we'll find another day. Thank you, Natalie. I know, Claro, Claro. Of course, Dolly. The best place in Sarana, Tel Aviv is Claro, the amazing restaurant. Yeah, I know. So, yeah, Dolly was so kind to me that actually she treated me to a beautiful breakfast yeah, in that restaurant that I would have never been able to afford to have breakfast at. So this is yeah, it was a very good breakfast, actually enough for three people, and I really hoped you would be able to join me, but yeah, of course you were not able because. Yeah, yes, Todd Morgan. I'll see you tomorrow. Exactly. I will see you tomorrow, Natalie. Well, hopefully it works. I'm mostly concerned about the weather because it's been raining the whole day today, and the forecast for tomorrow is a little bit, I don't know, I'm quite uncertain. So we'll see. Ci vediamo, Dolly. We'll definitely see each other again this summer, definitely, and hopefully we'll be able to make up for it and go to Claro together and say hi to your son as well. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your support, for those who have sent your donations. Thank you so much for your interest in my tours, and thank you for just being here for me, no matter where I'm taking you, be it Israel, St. Petersburg, Netherlands, I don't know where else. Yeah, thank you so much. It's precious. Bye bye, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. Let's just hope that the weather is okay. Bye bye.